Morning, everybody. How is everyone doing today? Welcome to Mastering Real Estate Negotiations. Appreciate everybody being on. If you're on Zoom, you can hear me okay, give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment. Also, everyone watching live on Facebook as well, drop a comment, let me know the audio is okay, and everybody can hear me. So appreciate y'all being on. David, Ronique, Sherry, Leo, everyone else on Facebook, everyone else on Zoom, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone can hear me well. Thank you. Thank you for that. So today we are talking about real estate negotiations as it pertains to real estate. So keep in mind, one class will not make you a master at negotiating. What happens with negotiating is that it takes time, it takes practice, it takes awareness. And what I want to talk through today are some different techniques that can be used in real estate negotiations, different techniques that you can use, and also different techniques that maybe are potentially used on you by other realtors. So keep that in mind. We're going to dive in. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that negotiation, let me go back here. I'm having an issue with my screen. There we go. Get that out of the way. Okay. Negotiation is not listening to what they say, but it's finding out what they want. So what does that mean? Negotiation is not listening to what they say, but finding out what they want. Because what people say and what people want can be very different. So this is the secret, and knowledge will give you standing, and it's going to help you understand what people really want. How do we understand what people really want? Well, we understand what people really want by asking good questions. Because as people are speaking to us and telling us things, are we listening, but also seeking to understand what the problem is that they need help being solved? And the more we actively listen and the more questions we ask and the more good questions that we ask, we can then obtain knowledge from that individual and help them accomplish their goal. And because at the end of the day, I've got another quote here I like a lot. It's that an objection, and in a negotiation, it's typically an objection, but an objection is a question in the mind of the customer that remains unanswered. We need to answer their question. So when we get an objection, like we got a commission objection, right, or something of that nature, or I'm gonna think it over. It's an objection. That is something where there is an unanswered question in the mind of that customer, and we need to help solve that question or answer that question. And so I want you to think about something real quick, because handling objections is negotiation as well. And what I like about our industry is that think about every objection you've ever received. So any objection you've ever received, whether it's on a listing appointment or a buyer consultation, buyer presentation, think about this for a moment. How many objections have you received? Or maybe you're making cold calls to expireds, or cold calls to for sale by owners, or calling internet leads. How many objections have you ever received? There's really only a handful. Like, think about it. If you start writing down every objection I've received, there's not that many in the grand scheme of things. There's, will you reduce your commission? Will you take it at a lower interest rate? I'm going to or lower commission rate. I'm going to interview other realtors. I need time to think about it. We're not actively looking for homes right now. Like, there's only a handful. So if you get really good at overcoming those objections, this business becomes a lot easier. Now, my final quote here before we dive into some tactics is by our man Al Capone, and he says, "You can get much further with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone." So unfortunately for us, we can't really take guns to our listing appointments. So we need to figure out how we can become really, really good at negotiating, so that, as much as I like this quote, we know it's not realistic in our industry. Although we do live in the state of Missouri, and you can conceal carry and open carry, so there's a benefit for all of the gun owners out there. But anyway, Al Capone says you can get much further with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone. So let's dive into some negotiation tactics, and let's start looking at that. And there's 9 negotiation tactics that I have. We're going to go through each one again so you can understand the tactics that you can utilize when you're negotiating, as well as tactics that maybe someone else is utilizing when negotiating with you. Now think about this. Who's ever sold a property for a CEO, somebody that runs a large organization, somebody that's actively negotiating multi-million or billion-dollar contracts, right? In that realm, we may be undermatched to handle the negotiation conversation with that individual because they're negotiating massive contracts on a regular basis. With real estate, we are paid to negotiate. And that's often what I tell clients, that especially you can utilize this when you're negotiating commission, is that at the end of the day, you're not only hiring me to sell your home, you're also hiring me to negotiate the best possible price for your property. Now, there are other discount brokers out there that will reduce their fee. And at the end of the day, if they can't negotiate on their own behalf, how good of a job do you think they're going to do when it comes time to negotiate the best possible price for your home? Probably not very well. So think about this. We are negotiators. We have to become skilled in negotiating. That is part of our job. Our job is not just to show property and list property. It's to negotiate terms and the best possible price and outcome for our client, whether it's a buyer or seller. So these are things we have to be practicing. We have to be studying. We have to be learning so that we can become better negotiators, because that's ultimately what we're getting paid to do. So let's talk about the negotiation tactics. First one, negotiation tactic number one is the wince. Ugh. Right? Someone gives you an incredible look. Who's received this before? Who's gotten this? Like, you tell somebody something like, oh man, right? It can be intimidating. It can throw you off your game. It can often be accompanied by silence then, or even like a grunt. Yeah, right? You see the face I'm making. Oh my, it can be intimidating if you don't recognize that it's a negotiation tactic. So has anyone had this happen to them where they're receiving some form of right? That's the wince. It is a negotiation tactic. And it can throw you off your game if you're not used to it, or you're not prepared for it, or you don't realize that it is a tactic. Right? It happens all the time. People hear a price, oh my God, oof, and then it's just silence, it gets uncomfortable. That is negotiation tactic number one, is the wince. You can use it, or you can be aware of it if someone uses it on you. The next one is silence. Negotiation tactic number two, silence. Never forget the power of silence. That massively disconnecting pause, which goes on and on and on, and may at last induce an opponent to babble and backtrack nervously. I'm going to give you an example of lack of this skill for me personally back in the day when I started selling real estate. I would go on my listing presentation, and they'd ask, how much is your commission? And I would say it's 6%. And then I would immediately say, but I can do it for 5%. I didn't even give them a chance to respond. And the reason for that was because I didn't believe in the value I had as a real estate professional to help them sell their home back then. I was new, I was inexperienced, I didn't know what I was doing. So I led with the fact that I was maybe cheaper than the competition. My commission is 6%, but I can do it for 5%. And what I've learned over the years is that you say the investment in my service is 6%, and you pause and you let them respond to that. All right. And so they may sit there and look at you, and you pause as well. And you don't say, I'll do it for 5 though. You say, how do you feel about that? If the pause starts getting really long, like there's a difference between it feeling like a long pause and actually being a long pause. If you say the investment in my service is 6%, and they sit there and you're just staring at each other. Now, the person that speaks first oftentimes is the one that loses. But in this instance, if you're literally, say they know this tactic and they're just staring you down, right, and it's really awkward and it's going on for 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds, all right, just say, how do you feel about that? You don't have to backtrack, just ask another question. But silence is a powerful negotiation tactic, a really powerful one, especially when it comes to handling commission objections, because how many times did I not utilize this tactic and just cut my commission for no reason? What if I had waited and said the investment in my service is 6%, and I paused and they said, okay, cool, that sounds good. Rather than me saying the investment in my service or my commission is 6%, but I can do it for 5%. Oh, okay, yeah, great, do it for 5%. I just lost on a $300,000 house, I just lost $3,000 right there. Right, so be thinking about that. Negotiation tactic number 2. Silence is a powerful tool and a powerful tactic that can be used to your advantage. And if you're not aware of it, you can become uncomfortable if the other side is utilizing that negotiation tactic with you as well. Something else I want you to think about with negotiating, and this isn't in my tactics, but let's just say you receive a contract on a property. And going to the client's house, for one, to negotiate. We used to have to do this a lot back in the day before e-signatures. We'd have to go to the client's house to get price adjustments, to get amendments signed. We had to get counteroffer signed, so on and so forth. Sit on the same side of the table as that person. Because if you're sitting across the table from them, it feels like a battle. If you're sitting on the same side of the table as them, it feels like it's a team and you're making an effort to help them accomplish their goal, which you are. So just something to think about. Tactic number 3, the good guy, bad guy routine. So tactic number 3 is the good guy, bad guy routine. And a lot of couples will use this. All right. Oh my gosh, when my spouse finds out about this, they're going to go crazy. When they find out about your commission rate, or when they find out this offer we received, they're going to be furious. This is technically the good guy, bad routine. They're using the spouse to negotiate. So you need to recognize this for what it is. And we see it a lot in real estate when it involves couples, because for the simple reason that it's an easy way or easy negotiation tactic when there's 2 people. Well, when my husband finds out, that the offer is this, he's not going to be happy. He's not going to take that. There's no way. That person hasn't even talked to the husband yet, or the wife, or their spouse, or their partner. They're just basically using this as a negotiation tactic. So keep that in mind. The good guy, bad guy routine. It does happen. Happens a lot in real estate when it comes and involves couples. Again, it's a negotiation tactic. How do we handle that? So how do we handle it? Well, my husband, let's do this. I'll tell you what, let's present the offer to your spouse. Let's look at all of the terms of the contract, and let's talk through it together. Why don't we get on a call? Why don't we schedule a time for the 3 of us to get on a call and talk through this? All right. We're handling those things by remaining calm and not just getting flustered when they're saying how furious their spouse may be, or how upset their spouse may be, or my spouse will never accept this. There's absolutely no way. They're getting very emotional. Right? We have to remain calm, and that's something we're going to talk about here in a moment as well. So negotiation tactic 4, limited authority. So limited authority is a negotiation tactic, and it's basically, again, very similar to the good guy, bad guy. It's blaming the spouse. So you know what? I'd love to make a decision, but I have to wait until my husband's available, or my wife's available, or my partner's available to make sure that we can do this. So what's important about this is that when you're going on a presentation, this is an important question to ask. You set a listing, you need to ask, this is why when you're conducting a presentation or presenting an offer, you want to make sure all decision makers are there. So make sure that everyone is present that is a decision maker, because people who use this as a tactic love to have one person missing so they can have limited authority. You know what? Before we make a decision, I have to run this by my spouse. Well, now you've negotiated with one person that maybe wasn't the decision maker, or maybe they're just using this tactic, and you're not negotiating with all parties involved. You always want to be negotiating with all parties involved. So if you set a listing appointment, make sure you ask, will all of the decision makers be present when I come out tonight at 5 o'clock? If not, you may want to think about rescheduling, possibly. When we're submitting an offer, who is the decision maker? You have a husband and wife. Typically, both are not the decision makers. Someone is usually steering the ship, right? So figure out and identify who that person is. That's ultimately the authority or the decision maker. Sometimes it's the husband, sometimes it's the wife. It just depends. So figure that out. But if they're both equal decision makers, make sure they're all there. Make sure every decision maker. Happens a lot when someone inherits a property. Someone inherits a property and they need to sell the property. Two of the siblings show up, but the third one's the executor. Third one's not there. Who's the final decision maker? The executor. So make sure that third person is there, or the executor is interviewing their own realtor, and the 2 people that don't really have the authority want to interview you. We need to make sure we get that executor there as well. So make sure that limited authority know this. This is the tactic. Make sure all decision makers are present when you present offers, when you go on appointments, buyer consultations, and listing presentations. Very, very important. Negotiation tactic number 5, the red herring. I like this one because it's kind of funny. The red herring. But what is the red herring on negotiation tactic number 5? So a lot of this stuff too came out. There's Harvard and MIT negotiation programs. A lot of this information came from those programs. But keep this in mind. When someone makes a low offer, so they're going to make a low offer, which do we see a lot of low offers right now? Absolutely not. We haven't seen them for a couple of years because of the limited inventory, but it does happen. And it was more common in the past when we were in a 9, 10, 11 month supply of inventory, a very strong buyer's market. you would see lowball offers or lower offers. So this is when someone makes a low offer and they slip a lot of other things into the offer as well. So they're slipping a lot of other things into the offer, like furniture and basement furniture and movie theater chairs and all of the TVs and just all kinds of stuff, right? They're throwing tons of things in, artwork, things like that. What this tactic is meant to do, red herring, is those other items are meant to distract you from the offer price, which is low. So when you get an offer like this, the most normal reaction is to be overwhelmed. Who's ever received an offer where there was just tons and tons and tons of terms, right? Price came in low. They're asking for everything. Maybe they're even asking for items to be fixed on the property without even doing an inspection. We've seen that happen in the past as well. Seller wants the deck replaced. Seller wants peering done. Seller or buyer wants the deck replaced. Buyer wants peering done. All of these things in the offer that really wasn't a good offer to begin with. So what happens here is that it's meant to be that way and it's meant to overwhelm you. So the key here is don't get discouraged. These red herrings, these are red herring offers, and they're really for negotiation tactics, and they're really focused on getting a great deal by bringing the number down low, by getting you to focus on all the other stuff and thinking that when you focus on getting rid of all the other stuff, you may concede on the lower number they offer. So we may just feel inundated with all this stuff. And like, well, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this, not going to do this, but maybe we'll concede a little bit more on price. Again, it's just a tactic meant to overwhelm you. And it happens, right? We can get offers like that, crazy offers like that. The same thing is true with home inspections. When you negotiate a home inspection and you get a 100-page inspection report and you see in the inspection notice, it says, see addendum A, you know that there's going to be a long list of items that they've typed on a Word doc or a PDF that now you have to address. So there might be 50 items on there, right? And maybe only a handful were really crucial to that buyer. So we need to sift through that and have good conversations with the agent to make sure that we're really objectifying or handling the things that are important and not getting overwhelmed with the amount of items on it. Maybe there's tons of little things. Install a smoke detector, put a GFI here, tons of smaller little items. And then there's some big items in there too. We need to figure out and isolate which items are really important. And that way we're not getting overwhelmed and we're handling that objection. So keep that in mind, the red herring. Negotiation tactic number 6. This is a really good tactic. I like to use this one myself. It's called the trial balloon. The trial balloon is basically going back to the other party and saying, if I could get my buyer to 500, would that work for you? Or would that work for your seller? Or if I can get my seller down to 600,000, would that work for you? So instead of committing your buyer or seller to that position, we can use what's called a trial balloon. That way, if it doesn't work out, they haven't committed to it. So, we could go back and say, listen, we're negotiating a contract for 30,000 apart. If I could get my seller to come to 500,000, would your buyer accept that? Now, some people may say, well, I don't know, put it in writing and send it to me. Totally understand. And I just want to know if we're even in the realm of reality here where we can make this offer happen. Why don't you talk to your client? See if they would be prepared. If I could potentially get my seller to this price, would they accept that? All right, so that, again, this is called a trial balloon where you're just throwing out kind of a hypothetical in a lot of ways. If I could make this happen, would it work for your client? We're not committing that we can. We're not saying I can get them here. We're saying if I could, would your seller be willing to go to that? Or would your buyer be willing to accept that? The trial balloon is a great way to utilize a great negotiation tactic that you can utilize, that you're not over committing or committing to anything for that matter. You're feeling out the other side to see if we can get them in a realm of reality to make this deal work. So keep that in mind for the trial balloon. Now, negotiation 7, which we don't see a lot of this anymore either, but we used to, is the low ball. The low ball is a tactic. Who's had clients that would just lowball everything, regardless of the price, even if it was priced right? I had an investor back in the day. He was going to offer 30% less on anything we saw. He didn't care. Offer him X, 30% less. Didn't matter if it was priced correctly. There's multiple offers. Offer him 30% less. So lowball is a tactic. He wanted a deal. So we have to know that going into this, but these are the buyers that are going to come in 25% or more off the sale price. What the lowball is doing is a figurative slap upside the head to the seller. So when this happens, we need to, one, advise our seller to appreciate the fact that we received an offer, and go back to the buyer and let them know we're very far off on price and we're coming back with a token counter offer, $5,000 off, right, of the sale price, and we would appreciate a better offer from the buyer. So what does this do? Because what happens when a seller gets, and again, are we seeing a ton of lowball offers right now? No, but it does happen. And we're seeing properties that are sitting on the market, some properties that may be overpriced, they're sitting on the market for a while and a lower offer may come in. But basically what happens when people receive a low offer, when sellers receive a lowball offer, what's the first thing that happens with the seller? Do they get offended? Absolutely they do. Most of the time, the sellers get offended. I can't believe they would offer that. That's ridiculous. And what does the realtor do? Well, an unskilled realtor gets emotional with them. Yeah, you're right. It's ridiculous. I can't even believe they gave us that offer. I can't, oh my God. And they get emotional with the client. And that's the wrong thing to do. You are the professional. This is not your home. You're helping someone facilitate a transaction. And I understand why they get emotional. They've tied in blood, sweat, tears, money, equity. They've lived in this home. They've raised their family in this home. It means a lot. There's a lot of emotion in selling a personal home. I understand. That's why you have to remain calm, though. So when we receive a lowball offer, don't get frustrated. Don't get worked up. Don't get emotional with the client if they're being emotional. What tends to happen is we need to, one, just say, listen, an offer is better than no offers at all. And let's go back to the seller, and rather than countering at full price or just rejecting the offer flat out, let's make a small adjustment on price. Allow me to go back and talk to the realtor, to the buyer's agent, and negotiate and see if I can get them up on price. So let's make a small counter offer as a way to keep the conversation and dialogue going. And I'll do what I can to see if I can get them up in price. Now, this tends to work a lot better than your seller just becoming super offended and you getting offended with them and not countering at all. So advise your client, though, that although this is not a good tactic, it is in fact a negotiation tactic and not to be offended. Listen, I understand you're offended. And to be honest, if this were my home, I would be offended too. And at the end of the day, this is a negotiation tactic used by some individuals to try to get a good deal. So rather than us getting really emotional around this and being offended, let's just appreciate the fact that we do have an offer in hand. Let's make a small counteroffer. Allow me to go back and discuss and negotiate with the buyer's agent to see what I can do to see if I can bring them up in price. How does that sound? Right? Utilize these negotiation tactics to your advantage and recognize them that they are in fact negotiation tactics. There are some people that will lowball offers. That's just in their nature. Right? Has anybody been overseas ever? Asia, things like that? Like you tend to, bargaining and negotiation is a big part of the culture. Like you go to the markets there and things like that, you negotiate on price. And so, there's a lot of call it price haggling. That happens a lot around the world. So keep that in mind too. For some people, negotiation is just a cultural thing. And we have to recognize that and know that. So it's not really, don't be offended. Just recognize the fact that it's a negotiation tactic and we need to adapt and negotiate back as well. So lowballing, tactic number 7. Number 8, negotiation tactic number 8, the bait and switch. It's a terrible tactic, but it does happen. It's a tactic I believe you should never use, but unfortunately we do see it. So this would be something like we get an offer. All right, let's just say it's a clean offer. So right here, buyer gives you a cash offer, no contingencies, 30-day closing, super clean offer. And let's just say it was a multiple offer as well. We accept it, fantastic, right? Well, we know in our contract that that buyer can't finance any portion of the offer. So they came in, they wrote cash, they had proof of funds, but now they decide they want to get a loan. So now they decide they want to get a loan, although it's not contingent on the offer, although the offer is not contingent on the financing, that 30-day closing might be a challenge now, right? So they may have to extend closing a bit. This is technically called the bait and switch. So this is when we get a clean offer, it's fantastic, and then they start adding stuff after the fact. Or who's had it happen where they've received an offer and it was as is, seller to do inspections for informational purposes only, and they're not going to ask for anything. And then all of a sudden an inspection notice comes over because they still kept in there their window or their right to do the inspection and ask for things. So now all of a sudden Although they said they weren't going to ask for anything, an inspection notice comes over. Hey, we need these items fixed. That's called the bait and switch. In my opinion, it's an unethical practice. I don't like to use it, and we need to be aware of it. So if we're receiving offers, we need to make sure that are similar, saying that offers are sold as is with no inspections or this or that. We need to make sure we're omitting sections of our listing or our sale contract to make sure that it truly is as is and it truly is no inspections. So keep that in mind as well, because the bait and switch is a very real thing. We see it happen a lot right now because of the competitive nature of the market that we're in, where people are writing cash offers and they do have the means to buy cash, but then they decide to finance later. Or they're buying as is, but then they start doing inspections. Keep that in mind. Bait and switch is a tactic that we need to be aware of. We need to know how to navigate against it. Now, the final tactic is number 9, and it's called, are you nuts? So who's had a client start screaming and yelling at them before? This is a tactic. So honestly, it's strange. It's a strange tactic, but it is a tactic. When people get very emotional and they start yelling and screaming, and they're highly emotional. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, right? They're screaming at you. This can be a intimidating tactic for some people. People can just fold up and break down. People can become highly emotional as well. This is why it's so important to remain calm. Calm is key when it comes to negotiating. Now, although this is a strange tactic, we see it a lot, especially when it comes to negotiating residential homes, because it's a person's personal home. It's the home they built, the home they love, the home they raised their family in. People can become highly emotional. It is very important that you recognize that this is a tactic. And when you recognize that this is a tactic, it becomes much easier to remain calm and let it roll off your back. You don't take it personal. They're upset. This is how they react. Does not mean you have to react with them, right? Very, very important. There are some people that get this way. If you remain calm, here's the other thing. Have you ever remained calm in the scenario when someone else is going nuts and screaming at you and you're not really reacting or buying into it? They start to feel kind of stupid. Like, I probably need to, well, what's going on? This person is not giving me the reaction that most people would normally give me. They're staying calm. They're staying even keel. It doesn't seem like this is even phasing them. They start thinking then, like, what the hell am I doing? Right? So think about that. If you remain calm, don't react with them, because it does happen. People are highly emotional. They can react. So are you nuts is a very real tactic. When this happens, recognize it immediately that this is a tactic that some people use and that you need to remain calm. And when you remain calm, you're going to be able to navigate through it much easier. So those are our 9 negotiation tactics that I want you to be aware of and start thinking about while you're negotiating offers. Start thinking about, did I get a red herring where they're throwing in a bunch of stuff here? Did I get a low ball? Did I get the are you nuts tactic number 9, where people are highly emotional and yelling at me and screaming all the time and super offended and this and that? Be thinking about these things as you're restructuring offers and negotiating offers with others, with individual customers, clients, and other agents. Now that we know our 9 tactics, let's talk a little bit about how do we handle these. So how do we handle simple steps, 5 simple steps now to handling objections? Well, one we've mentioned as a tactic, but a way to handle that tactic as well is the pause. Silence is golden. Silence is golden. Just keep that in mind. Pause. Don't feel like you have to speak and speak and speak and speak and speak. It's okay to pause. It's okay to have silence. It's okay to ask a question and then pause and receive the answer. It's okay to make a statement and then pause and wait for them to respond. So number 1 for the 5 simple steps to handling objections is 1, the pause. Silence is golden. Number 2 is repeat and acknowledge the objection. This is very important. We teach this a lot in scripting, the importance of repeating, and we call it repeat and affirm or repeat and acknowledge the objection. What does that mean? That means if someone gives me an objection, I'm going to repeat it back to them and affirm to them that I heard it and I understand. All right, I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you're on a call with somebody and or you're on a buyer consultation and you're sitting there and you say, okay, so where are you planning on moving to? They say Florida. How many bedrooms, what area would you like to move in? That was a bad example. What area would you like to live in? Chesterfield. How many bedrooms do you need? 3. How many bathrooms do you need? 2. What's important to you about the home? Well, I want an open floor plan, this. Okay, how many car garage do you need? How big of a yard do you need? Does that feel like a good conversation, or does that feel like an interrogation? Feels like an interrogation, and that's what we don't want to do. So instead, I would ask, what area would you like to move to? Chesterfield. Oh, Chesterfield's a fantastic area. What's having you want to move to Chesterfield? For what reason would you like to move to Chesterfield? Well, we want to be into the school districts. Oh yeah, there's some fantastic school districts in Chesterfield. Anyone in particular you'd like to be in? Great. So how many bedrooms would you like to have? 3 bedrooms. Fantastic. What's important to you about having 3 bedrooms? Well, we need 2 for our children and 1 for us, or so on and so forth. You get my point. It's a much softer conversation now, not an interrogation. And I'm repeating back and listening to them, and I'm responding by affirming that I'm listening, hearing what they're saying, and acknowledging that I'm hearing what they're saying. So keep that in mind when you have conversations. This is true when you're cold calling, when you're calling internet leads, when you're calling expireds, when you're calling for sale by owners. It's also true on listing presentations, buyer consultations, when you're showing property. Ask better questions. The more you repeat and affirm and ask more questions, the better you're going to be in this business. Now, number 3 is to isolate the objection. So what does that mean? I use this a lot as an example when I talk about listing commissions, especially. So I'm sitting at the kitchen table of a listing appointment, and I say, are you ready to get started? And they say, well, we need to think about it. All right, so we get that a lot. We need to think about it. Totally understand you need to think about it. And out of curiosity, what's stopping you from working with me right now? From deciding to move forward with me? Well, your commission's high. Okay, I can appreciate that. And other than my commission, is there anything else stopping you from signing the paperwork and putting me to work for you tonight? Nope, it's just commission. Somebody else said they do it for 5%. So if we can figure out this commission, would you be prepared to sign the contract and put me to work for you? Yeah, we would. Fantastic. Now I go handle that. So I'm isolating that objection, because here's what happens. If they say, no, we need to think about it, and I say, okay, well, what's totally understand, and I can appreciate that, and what's stopping you from working with me? Well, the commission. Okay, great. And I move right into my commission objection handle. And then I handle it. And they say, well, we still need to think about it. There's something else. Remember, keep in mind, right? It's an unanswered question in the mind of the client. So there's something else stopping them. So if I isolate the objection, now I know I need to go handle this objection. And when I handle this, they're going to put me to work for them. But if I just ask that and don't isolate it, and I handle the objection, and maybe there's something else that's stopping them from working with me, right? Now all of a sudden I've handled that, but I'm still not any closer to my goal. So keep in mind, isolate the objection. Other than commission, is there anything else that would stop you from working with me? Nope, that's it. It's just commission. Somebody else is at 4%, 5%, or whatever it may be. Isolate. Fantastic. If we can figure out this commission and you feel comfortable, would you agree to sign the paperwork and put me to work for you today? Yes, we would. Great. Let's talk through it. Move into your objection handling, your commission objection handling. So that's number 4, deal with it. So I want to isolate it, isolate my objection, and then I'm going to deal with it. And I'm going to deal with it by knowing my objection handlers, becoming skilled at this, practicing this. And then number 5 is close the deal. So I'm going to isolate, I'm going to deal with it by handling the objection, and then I'm going to close. Are you ready to put me to work so we can get your home sold and get you to your new home in Florida? Go back to motivation. Where are they moving to? Motivation is a big key in negotiation as well. What is their goal? Your goal is to sell your home to be moved to an area to be closer to your grandkids, correct? That is still the goal, isn't it? Well, let's do this. Let's make a counter offer and allow me to go negotiate with the buyer's agent to get them up on price so we can get this home under contract and get you closer to that next step and your next goal of being closer to your grandkids. How does that sound? Close the deal. All right, so those are the 5 simple steps in handling the objection. Now, I'm going to leave with this too. We've got one other here, actually 2, but the golden rule of negotiation and the number 1 mistake is never assume. Never assume that you know what the other person wants. Well, this is what I want, so I'm sure that's what they want too. That's how people can tend to think. Well, that's what I would want. It's a no-brainer. You know, that's a good deal. Why don't we? I'm just going to go make that happen for them. Never assume that you know what the other person wants. You have to find out what they really want by asking a lot of good questions. The more questions we ask, we can seek to understand what is important to them. That allows us to probe for needs and motivation. Ask questions. What do you really want? Why do you want this? Why is that important to you? Figure out the why behind the why. Very, very important in negotiation to never assume. Never assume we know what the other person's thinking. Never assume we know what the other person wants. We need to uncover that by asking the right questions, by continuing to seek to understand and understand why is that important to you? Well, for this, this, and this. Totally understand, and that makes a lot of sense. Continue to ask questions. What's important about that? Same is true, like this is off negotiation topics, but we'll talk about this in our buyer consultation training in a couple of weeks. But when someone says I need a 4-bedroom house, what's important about having a 4-bedroom house? Just don't say, okay, yeah, great, you need a 4-bedroom. Find out why that's important. Ask better questions. Figure out the why behind the why. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this. In negotiation, he who cares less wins. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean we just shouldn't care at all? No, it means we need to be in negotiation. We need to be prepared to walk away. So what that means is that if I'm on a listing appointment and I don't feel I can come to terms or get clarity and have mutual agreement with a seller, am I prepared to walk away? All right. So, or maybe someone's just not treating you very well. Are you prepared to walk away? So how do we care less? Doesn't mean that we necessarily care less. It means that we're willing and able to walk away from a deal if it's not benefiting us or if it's not mutually beneficial. Well, one of the ways we can do that is if we have a lot of cash reserves, I'm not tied to a deal. If I was tied, like if I just needed this deal to close because I was banking on it and I needed the money so bad and my house was getting ready to go into foreclosure and I need to make this work and in order to make my next house payment or to get caught up or this or that, well, you know what? In that situation, we don't have a whole lot of power. All right, we're going to take some abuse. We're just trudging along, trying to, and probably not doing a great job for the client because we're totally focused on just getting the deal done no matter what it takes because we need a paycheck. And when the commission becomes more important than the client's needs, that's when everybody loses, especially the realtor. So keep that in mind. One way we can care less is by having a more full pipeline, by having more cash reserves. When we're making money, make sure we're saving our money, make sure we're not in bad financial spots, make sure we're doing everything we can to really build a big, successful, abundant business so that we can walk away from things. It's the same way when we're negotiating price on a listing. If someone's price wants $500,000 and the house is worth $400,000, and you're just so desperate to take a listing that you're going to take it $100,000 overpriced because you just want a listing, and you're like, well, maybe it'll sell, right? And at the end of the day, all we end up doing is taking an overpriced listing. So keep that in mind. And so I just had a question too. How do you handle a situation when the other party is not willing to compromise? It's exactly this. It's being willing to walk away. I would love to help you accomplish your goal of getting your home sold for $500,000. And at the end of the day, all of the data that I'm sharing with you shows your home is worth $400,000. Now, there are other realtors that will take a listing overpriced just to have a listing, but that's not my goal. My goal is to help you get your home sold and get you moved to wherever they're planning on moving. And at the end of the day, I would rather turn you down right now and part as friends rather than letting you down 60 to 90 days from now. So be willing to walk away. All right. And that's where in negotiation, he who cares less wins. Of course, we want to take every listing. Absolutely, we do. I want to get every single listing I go on, 100%, no doubt about it. But I'm also prepared to walk away from a situation that may not be the best situation for me. Like, do I want to go spend money on something that I know it's not going to sell? Early on in my career, I just wanted every listing. I wanted every listing so I could talk about it at the Tuesday team meeting. Everyone clapped for me. Hey, I just took a listing for $1 million. Oh my God, you're awesome. It was worth $700. All right, I'm spend $1,500 on marketing and signs and photography and all of this stuff on something that's never going to sell. Right? Then they're going to fire me in 2 months. They're going to hire somebody else. Somebody else is going to list it at $750. It's going to sell. That person is going to be the hero. So keep that in mind. That's how we handle a situation when the other party is not willing to compromise. We have to be prepared to walk away. So hope that was helpful. Hope it was beneficial. Keep in mind that the 9 tactics this is recorded, of course. It's on our Facebook page, NettWork Global Agents. And then we've got some good trainings coming up next week. And the next couple of weeks, we've got how to convert internet leads. And then on Wednesday, and then June 4th, We've got Jill McCoy talking about building your real estate portfolio. We have a handful of other trainings the following week as well around the NAR commission, or the commission deal with the lawsuit, new scripting around it, new contracts around it, as well as we're going to be going through live buyer consultation training as well. So appreciate everybody being on. I don't see any other questions, but if you're watching this later and have questions, drop them in. We'll get them answered. Thank you all. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.